Just before we begin this morning formally, I'd like to share a couple of reflections with you about what we heard yesterday. And I'd like to thank Katie Jeffs, who works with us as our new Director of Member Outreach, for her thoughts in sort of formulating these reflections. And if you haven't met Katie yet, you should. Our membership, the face of our membership, as we've heard yesterday, is going to change. And someone like, it's going to be Katie who's going to be leading edge on the outreach in that area. And I think she's going to do a fabulous job. I've been coming to this conference for 12 years, and I have never experienced a more positive mood than this year. And it goes without saying, in the last few years, there has been a great deal of uncertainty. And if we go back 2 years, 3 years, the overwhelming comment we heard was a sense of negativity, and it's a downer, and things have to change. And last year, when Norman, Mark, and I sat down for the content of this event, we really decided, you know what, it had to be two things. It had to be positive, and it had to be ecumenical. It didn't just have to be about producers anymore. This had to be a community event. And I think to some extent we've achieved that, because when you walk the hallways, you hear, if you have a very positive feel. It's hard to assess your own party, obviously, but that's the mood I think we're getting. And there are three words that keep coming up over and over again as you listen in the hallways or you listen over the meals: collaboration, partnership, and community. Collaboration, partnership, and community. Community. We saw the birds yesterday. Some of us may have dreamt of Pachelbel's Canon. Some of us may have dreamt of what Brent Butt was singing. You don't know, but we saw the birds. We've seen what's gone on in Egypt, and we've heard about the Mothers for Daycare for Obama. All of these communities. And the question becomes: is community the new king? Does it trump content? Who knows? But it is certainly absolutely a factor. Community is definitely going to influence how we create and how we consume content. The power of social media, crowdsourcing, social audience, and audience connection. The notion of community was at the cornerstone of our keynote addresses yesterday. And these communities will give rise to new revenue opportunities. And they're definitely going to influence how we produce content. The question is, what will that do to our production models? What will that do to our distribution models? And I don't think there's any clear consensus yet as to where this is going, but I think we're getting better at defining the questions. One thing is clear, though: communities don't simply want to be directed, they want to have a hand in the direction. And we're going to have to be sensitive to that. The question is, will we be quick enough on the uptake to really adapt to that? As for collaboration and partnership, we have to think, we heard yesterday about the need to think differently domestically, internationally, and again, with the audience in mind. The audience is our new partner. It is our new collaborator. We have to think about that. I think Robert Tursik's checklist yesterday, if you remember that, how he evaluates projects, I think that was a very interesting, very insightful piece of work. And certainly, I think, it certainly left me with a very strong impression that we have to think entirely differently about how we deliver content. It can no longer simply be a push model. And regulators and policymakers are going to have one heck of a challenge in the next little while, and we are going to have to work with them to assist them and be patient and collaborative in doing so. We have to be mindful of these larger issues, but we also have to be mindful of practical issues: vertical integration, the impact of the over-the-top services, and the need for balanced relationships in all parts of the production and distribution food chains. There has to be fairness and equity all the way along, but there also has to be creativity, there has to be flexibility, and there has to be a need to realize that the world is changing. Finally, I think we need to reflect on who's in this room and who's not. And I think the challenge for us at the CMPA is going to be very much, who do we bring to the room next year who isn't here this year? And it may be a very different world a year from now. So I'd like now to turn to introduce our first breakfast speaker. Over the past 40 years, the Canadian audiovisual industry has developed a world-class product, a deep talent pool, and a game-changing innovation. Are these successes enough to bring out Canadian audiences, or is there something we're missing? We're here to discover this morning the interesting things on the mind of Telefilm Canada's new executive director as the organization plans its next 4 years. So please give me help us with a very warm welcome for Ms. Carolle Brabant.
Merci beaucoup, John. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Je suis vraiment très heureuse d'être avec vous aujourd'hui et d'avoir l'occasion de vous parler d'un sujet qui me passionne énormément. As many of you know, I was appointed Executive Director of Telefilm Canada 11 months ago. But after more than 20 years of service with the organization. I see my history with the organization as a great advantage. I've had the pleasure of working in close contacts with Canada's audiovisual industry and its members, you. In the last 11 months, I have focused on meeting people from many different parts of the industry. And that has given me an even broader perspective. And I've also worked with many bright and dedicated people at Telefilm who always strived to reach the full potential of the industry and our organization. They are there. And that is the best way to begin what I have to say. Right now, Telefilm is at the beginning of a new corporate plan. We spent most of last year consulting with the industry, researching particular topics, and formulating ideas for the next 4 years. What we discovered was a surprising degree of consensus about where the industry is going and what kind of support it needs to succeed. And if you think that means maintaining the status quo, I think you have a little surprise in store. As Robert Tursick said, we will have to stop looking in the rearview mirror. And as I don't drive, I very rarely look into the rearview mirror. In fact, my husband really hates it when I do that. I won't be launching the corporate plan today, but I do want to talk about the principles it will be based on. I believe we have reached the most important turning point for the industry in a long time. The approach I will outline for you today is what my team will be focused on, and it's what I hope the industry will help us accomplish. During this learning experience we have undertaken over the last several months, we had an opportunity to pause and reflect on what we need to move ahead. Consider for a moment this quote from the movie Field of Dreams. Build it, and they will come. And I'm not referring to the Quebec Arena. Simple optimism, faith that we will succeed if we simply build or create something of value. But is that always true? For example, what happens if you build a strong audiovisual industry that makes world-class production and the audiences don't come? In many ways, that's the problem we're facing in Canada right now. How do we get our productions in front of larger audiences, more audiences, and new audiences? That is where we need to step up our efforts. Sir Alan Parker once said, "No one is ever going to replace Hollywood, but we can offer alternatives to it." His comments really apply to all national film industries in countries outside the US. Now, there's a statement that makes me very optimistic. We don't have to beat Hollywood at its own game in order to succeed. And of course, this is a concept you already understood, that without big budgets, we have to concentrate on the best stories with the most artistic merit and produce them with flair. This is one strategy driving the production excellence we see in our industry right now. And here's an analogy for what Alan Parker is saying. On connaît tous la qualité des vins et des fromages français. En fait, on a servi les vins et les fromages français pendant longtemps. Qui aurait pu croire qu'un pays comme le Canada, jeune, froid, aurait pu développer une alternative aux vins et aux fromages français? Mais nous en avons créé une. En fait, ce matin, à CTV, on annonçait que la consommation des vins canadiens avait progressé d'une façon fulgurante. Le Québec produit d'excellents fromages. La majorité sont des produits originaux et non des copies de fromages français. For Ontario and British Columbia, its wines are gaining popularity around the world. In fact, our ice wines are considered to be the world's best. And I know some of my colleagues that are, when they're traveling to British Columbia and Ontario, they make a point to go to pick some of the wines that are not offered in Quebec. So Canada has really created a high-quality alternative to French dominance in wines and cheese. The other half of the equation is how our consumers feel about these products. Do Canadians prefer to buy and consume Canadian wines and cheese because these industries have become so successful? And do Canadians prefer to watch Canadian films and television programs because our audiovisual industries has become so successful? And with that in mind, let's return to Build It and They Will Come. But this time, let's have a deeper look. First, what is it that we've built in our audiovisual industry, and how good is the product? How worthy is it of audiences' attention? Second, how many have come? Perhaps more important, how have we been measuring those who have come? And does it reflect the true success of the industry we have built? And third, what do the first two tell us about our priorities and the direction the industry should be taking? So what have we built in our audiovisual industry, and how good is it? Over several decades, we have developed the capability of producing nothing less than world-class films and television programs. Now, we're also among the world's best on digital platforms. Sans surprise, je ne vois pas que vous soyez très opposés à cette déclaration. Une image vaut 1000 mots, alors plutôt que de vous parler de nos succès, regardons-les ensemble. So please join me in watching this brief video clip.